We are live.
Welcome. Am I on the screen? There I am. Greg Barnes, what's happening?
Not too much, guys. How's it going this evening?
Going well. Let's get this rolling. On the beat live. Ross Martin joining the party. Let's go.
What's up? What's up?
Welcome to Inside Carolina Podcast. This is On the Beat Live, our normal Tuesday 9 p.m. session. I did a special podcast last night live. If you haven't done so, check it out. A lot of great information from Jason Staples, Taylor Vippolis there. But this is the bell cow of the live Inside Carolina Podcast. We got Greg Barnes, producer John Bauman, and we got Ross Martin joining us. The two on the beat, true on the beat, folks. What's going on, fellas?
Hey, happy to join, guys. Let's get going. Good to see John's face. Happy to be back on the beat. Tommy, Greg, let's talk some football.
It's been a long time since we've had Ross on the beat, Tommy.
I know it's been a while. I mean, he's been on the scoop, and I've tried to get you back on here, Ross. I'm glad you finally agreed to come on.
Well, the real reason why we brought Ross on tonight is actually it's for physical therapy tips. Ross, we're going to give you a couple tips on how to repair the shoulder there. You know, we can give you some exercises maybe.
There you go. Thanks, John.
Well, Gregory Hall did a good piece on Curious Conley and his rehab. So I heard through the grapevine that Gregory's writing a piece on Ross that should come out, I guess, around Labor Day.
What did I miss, Ross? You had surgery? Is that what you got around?
I tore my right pec bench pressing on July 2nd.
365 pounds, and the third rep was just too much.
The news is out. So I had surgery 2 weeks ago. I had surgery about last Friday, 2 Fridays ago. And I'm going to sling for 6 to 8 weeks, and I won't be able to run or work out for 4 months.
Wow. That's got to suck.
Yep. It sucks.
Well, one thing you can do is talk. So let's talk about it. I'm going to come to you right out the gate. Carolina football opens camp on Friday. Expectations were through the roof last year this time. This year, not so much, Ross. Your thoughts on getting to this point now, 3 days away from preseason camp? I think Mack Brown's got his work cut out for him in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I think Greg wrote a good piece at ACC Media Day, kind of just about where expectations are with this team. It doesn't seem like there's much hype, and I think that's kind of a good thing. They're kind of flying underneath the radar because they have to replace Sam Howell. They've lost 3 stars in the offensive line. There's some unknowns at different position groups. So they're not being talked about much. Like I don't feel the same vibe, the same hype, but I do think they have a lot of talent in the 4th year of recruiting under Mack. And I think you're going to see some breakout stars. You're going to see Miles Murphy have a big year. Desmond Evans maybe finally becomes a player. Those type of guys are now juniors and seniors or redshirt sophomores. And so I think there's a lot of talent. And I think these low expectations, may turn some heads come October, November. All the eyes are on quarterback, and we'll have some previews coming out on the site soon about each position, and quarterback's going to be the first one. And that's where it starts. I think quarterback is so important for college football. And so if they get the right guy and it clicks, I think there's a lot of weapons on offense too. So there's definitely a lot of potential. But as one person told me, you don't date potential. You got to date the real thing. You got to marry the real thing. So hopefully for the Tar Heels, some of that comes true.
Yes, the Don and Ross dating
metaphors
examples come in early. They come in early.
Yeah.
Greg Barnes, Greg is this under the radar stuff real for this team? I mean, let's be honest. They crapped the bed last year. Did they learn the lesson?
I mean, that's the question, right? And it is a good question about flying under the radar. Like, doesn't matter. We know that this team did not handle the hype last year. A variety of players have talked about how they read the headlines last year. Brooks was talking about that down in Charlotte, the ACC kickoff last week. And they saw the headlines. They saw the top 10 preseason ranking. They saw the preseason ACC Coastal Division favorite. And then they walked into Lane Stadium and got smacked. And they did the same thing in Atlanta. So whatever Mack has to tell these guys to kind of move past that is a stepping stone. And it's all hindsight and silver lining stuff. But when you're in the program building phase, sometimes you need to have some adversity along the way. It can't just be a elevator ride to the top. There's got to be some struggle involved. And maybe that was it last year. Maybe that was saying, hey guys, too many times you just thought because you're North Carolina that teams are going to roll over for you. That's not happening. And so they've got to get that out of their heads that teams are scared of them because of the name on the jersey. That's not the case. Teams don't care about recruiting rankings and all that stuff. So that's what Mack's selling. That's what Gene Chizik's kind of putting in place. So you have to earn every inch, and we'll see. It sounds good right now, but it sounded good last summer as well. So we'll have to see how things play out. I think it is a very smart scheduling maneuvering that Mack did in getting Florida A&M as that first game, so they don't have to go to Boone as the first game for whatever quarterback is going to be starting. I think that was a very smart, savvy move. It didn't work out last year, even though they had Sam Howell coming back. So I think those types of things kind of help set the tone for this team, and we'll see if it pays off.
Tommy, how are you feeling about this team? You listen to the message boards. But you're a big fan. I mean, this is what you love. How are you feeling as a fan, kind of looking from the inside, but a little bit from the outside?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year I finally learned the Carolina football lesson. I've been saying it's an 8-win team forever, and I bought into the hype. I think we all did for the most part. I mean, Greg was probably the most pessimistic, but what surprised me the most, and Ross, your question to me brings me to where I was going with you, is they walked into Lane Stadium and they were shook, flat out shook. And that was a hell of an environment. I wasn't in the press box with you guys, so I don't know if it was antiseptic up there for y'all, but in it was crazy. And that team was shook. And Boone, while it will be a smaller version of that, it's still going to be hectic and crazy up there. So my question is, Mack Brown talked, and Ross and Greg can chime in. The one thing that concerns me is Mack talked about guys not listening and guys not reacting to him. And I asked Vip and Jason that last night. Does that change in 6 months or however long it's been since South Carolina beat them to death in the bowl game? Does that change for a lot of these guys? Or is it going to take another one of those moments like Virginia Tech gave them, Ross? Because I don't think they can have that moment this year. I think they got to start 3-0. If they don't start 3-0, the air is out of the bubble or out of the balloon right away. Where do you stand there?
I mean, I think the game in Boone is huge. And I've been saying on Twitter almost once a week that, I mean, you can't lose that game. You just can't lose to Boone to App again and have Mack start off 4 years 0-2 versus App State. Now, I think UNC's better than they were in 19. I think App's taking a little step back. They were really good in 19. They had some NFL players on that roster. So yeah, I mean, I think they'll preach about what went wrong against Virginia Tech. I think the presence of Gene Chizik and just a little bit more experience in the coaching staff across the board with Coach Warren, I think that will help. I think, and everybody's a little bit older. I think they lost some players, but as a whole, I think the team is generally a little bit older. And a lot of the starters are older. So, and like Greg said, I mean, it sets up nicely. You at least have 3 games. App State's not going to be an easy game, but you do have 3 games that are not ACC caliber opponents until Notre Dame comes to town. Greg?
And that's sorry to cut you off, Greg, but that's a good segue too into one of Mack Brown's most interesting comments at ACC Media Day last week while Ross was eating crab legs. Mack Brown was talking about how the team was criminally overrated last year. And I think that's really been a theme of the offseason. Mack was also hitting on that a lot in the spring. But the question was in relation to being perhaps criminally underrated in 2022. And I think that's also one of the big storylines that we're seeing. Is this team maybe being underappreciated? I think they were picked 3rd in the ACC preseason Coastal poll. So is there maybe a little bit of that going on as well? Is this team perhaps underrated heading into 2022?
Greg?
I don't think so. And that's the great conversation about last year, right? Were they criminally overrated? Was this a top 10 team? No, it was not. So from that standpoint, yes, they were overrated. But this was not a 6-7 team last year either. I mean, let's be real about that. That team should have won at least 8 games. And by buying into the concept that, hey, well, they're this way overrated, the hype was just too early. I mean, that kind of frees up the coaching staff a little bit from blame. And I think there's plenty of blame to go around. And part of that is, what you mentioned, John and Ross, about Mack talking about guys kind of being disrespectful last year. You got to nip that in the bud very quickly. And if you don't, you get those guys out of there. And that's the problem. But that's a coaching thing. And Mack has done a good job this offseason kind of owning up to his failures last year and the corrections that he needs to make. Hopefully Gene Chizik plays a big part of that. But is this team being underrated? If you look in the Coastal Division, I don't think so. I mean, is Miami maybe getting too much praise? Possibly. But I think Pitt's really good. I think you can make the case that Pitt's underrated. I figured they would be the favorite to win the Coastal. I know they lost Pickett and Jordan Addison, but everybody else is back, and they got Slovis in from USC, who's a good quarterback. And their defense is probably going to be tops in the ACC. Maybe right there behind Clemson, which will have another good defense. So I don't think it's really underrating Carolina to say, hey, well, they're preseason 3 in the Coastal, because I think that's where they belong. Because I do think Miami and Pitt have a little bit of an edge on them.
Yeah, I think football ever been underrated? Serious question, Ross.
Who?
Carolina football. Has Carolina football ever been underrated?
I mean, I guess in 15, that team turned it around. But Mack is this master politician, man. I mean, it's unbelievable, and everybody buys into it. Like, he's just a nice, cuddly teddy bear on the outside. But, I mean, he says things that save his ass, save the coach's asses. Can I cuss here? I don't know.
You did.
But I mean, look, like blaming the media last year, that was such a joke about how the media hyped him up or how the media picked him top 10. And I think 3 is the perfect rating. That's where I had them. I had them 3. I'd be interested to see where Greg had them. But I think Greg's right. I think Miami maybe is a little overrated, but they have a great quarterback. That's what I'm buying into. And then Pitt returns a lot and has the transfer quarterback. But just the Coastal's so weak. I mean, I think Duke's be awful. That coach, man, that coach said something to me at media day that was very disrespectful.
Elko did?
Yeah, I went up to. I'll tell a story here. A little loose here on the beat. I went up to him and he was with Art, the SID from Duke. Art
Chase. Yeah.
Chase, who like is a great guy. I love Art Chase. So I was just talking to him. We were walking away, and I was like, "Hey, Coach, Ross Martin, I cover the Tar Heels. Welcome to North Carolina." He goes, "Oh, good for you." I was like, "Damn, man!" Like I wasn't like bragging about being a sports writer. I was just telling you that I cover your rival. Whatever. I mean, I think Virginia and Virginia Tech, they have some talent. But there's new coaches for Virginia and Virginia Tech. So I think I think UNC fits perfectly at 3. They got some, Josh Downs, they got a lot of talent. And I think the defense is going to take a big step up. I'm pretty excited about seeing how the defense is. There's guys who might not even start, like Rod Dilworth might not even start. And he's a guy who I'm super excited to see. And Rucker and Desmond Evans. And we can get into the weeds on defense, but I think there's going to be I think 3 is perfect. And I think they have a chance to win a lot of games. And they also have a chance to lose games. And that's the Coastal. Rest in peace.
So in terms of being underrated, so S&P Plus projections have Carolina at 7.5 wins. I think a lot, I'll say a handful of the betting sites have UNC's over under at 7.5. What are we thinking there?
It's got to be over. If it's not over, it might be over. I mean, they can't go under. They cannot go 6 or 7 this year. I don't think. Ross, what do you think? Let's talk about these standings and let's talk about y'all's picks.
What was the over under? Sorry, I missed that, Greg. What was the over under?
7.5.
Yeah, it's probably about right.
That's fair.
3-0 start, way over. If they lose to App State, but Ross, let's talk about your predictions since people are already calling you out in the chat over here.
Like where my Atlantic picks and my coastal
Yeah,
picks.
well, both. Yeah, everything you got.
My coastal was perfect. My coastal was exactly what the media turned out. So people get mad. Like posting my Atlantic and my coastal pissed off Clemson fans, State fans, and UNC fans. So I couldn't make anybody happy. I just thought. I mean,
how did it make State fans unhappy?
Because they thought I was
jinxing
them. Yeah, they thought I was like talking shit and trying to get them.
Whoa.
But I mean, look, State. I just thought it was their time. I was going to give them the #1 ranking because they wanted the hype. They have the quarterback. I do think quarterback is very, very important, and they have a good quarterback. But I mean, I thought Clemson would get picked 1 overall. I think Clemson has so much returning on defense, and they'll get it figured out at quarterback. And they get State in Death Valley, which is big. But beyond that, I mean, I think it's all, how good is Florida State and Louisville really going to be? I don't know if Greg could answer that more, but the Coastal should be interesting, like always. I think the game at Miami versus UNC is going to be a good one.
Yeah, I do have the standings here, just if people haven't seen them. So the Atlantic Division, Clemson was first place with 111 first place votes. NC State was second with 44. And then in the Coastal, Miami was first. But Miami, Pitt, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech, 6 of the 7 teams, received at least 1 vote for the Coastal Division Championship, which I think perfectly illustrates the Coastal Division chaos. I don't know, Greg, how much you can share, but what went into your thought process if you filled out a preseason media ballot for the ACC?
I think it's pretty easy, especially for the Coastal Division. You look at what's coming back. You look at the coaching staffs. And Pat Narduzzi, I want to say every year that he's been at Pitt has finished higher than where they were picked in the standings. They've just always been overlooked. And I think a lot of that's because there's not a lot of media in Pittsburgh that covers the team. And we just kind of consider them to be an afterthought, but they've done well. I mean, they've won the Coastal, 2 of the last 3 years, I think. Miami, it's interesting. A lot of people say Miami's overrated every single year. It's not quite to that standard. They do get a little bit of a reprieve, if you will, because of their glory days under Butch and before that. But they've only been picked first in the Coastal 5 times, and they won one of those times back in 2017. So Miami, Pitt, I thought clearly were going to be 1 and 2. North Carolina, because of how things played out last year, I think that's a nice fit at number 3. And then you start talking about, well, we got all these new coaches. And that's kind of a big part of it. You got Pry at Virginia Tech, Elliott at Virginia, Elko at Duke, and then whatever the train wreck is that Jeff Collins is putting together in Atlanta. So I'm trying to remember. I may have had Duke above Georgia Tech, but that's at the bottom of the standings. Really doesn't matter. And then
last year for Collins, right?
Got to be, unless they just are gangbusters this year. Yeah. He's a good recruiter and a good salesman, but he just can't coach. Hasn't proven to yet. And then the Atlantic, everybody talks about the downfall of Clemson and what they do last year. They won 10 games in like the worst year that they've had in a decade. And that speaks to what Dabo's done. I think NC State's going to walk into Death Valley and get smacked. That's going to be must-see TV. I think Wake is probably going to finish above NC State in the standings, but I think those 3 are pretty solidly at the top of the Atlantic.
How does Wake not get more love? I mean,
defense.
Same
as Carolina. Right? Their defense was terrible last year. They got they brought in the defensive coordinator from Purdue, who's buddies with the head coach. But I think that's it. It's kind of like Carolina. Carolina, even though they brought in Gene Chiswick, they have a lot of talent. The defense hadn't been worth a flip the last several years, and so people are taking a wait and see approach.
That quarterback is a stud.
Yeah,
yep.
Sam
Nobody
Hartman.
talks about him.
He wore a Peaky Blinders hat at ACC Media Day on Wednesday. So,
interesting cat. Let's get into it, John. You got some questions from the YouTube chat, and people keep tossing them in. I mean, we'll get to as many as possible. We've got Ross Martin, Greg Barnes here.
Yeah, be nice to me on that chat. People are getting pretty mean to me on there.
But we have to remember too. 166 people here. We are live. Ross as well. We're here live on YouTube. So yeah, if you have any questions for us, post them here in the chat pod and we can bring them up. This is an interesting one from one of our favorite viewers here. Best quarterback in the conference. Greg, Ross, Tommy, what do you think?
I just mentioned him, I think.
Really? Yeah.
No Devin Leary?
No Devin Leary. I mean, the guy's pretty good, but we'll see what he does without a top 5 draft pick guarding his blind side. And the thing about that team is Carolina's defensive line flat out destroyed State until the very end, and they still destroyed them.
I mean, Carolina should have won that game. That's been the worst meltdown I've ever seen Carolina have in that State game.
And for that reason, I think the State hype is way too high, I think.
I mean, people love Tyler Van Dyke. I don't know if Greg, if you have something to say about him, but people love him. He took over last year, right? Midseason.
He took over in the Carolina game. You got heat because he threw that pick late, which kind of sealed it for Carolina. But after that, he was fantastic and really took over. And Derek King became an afterthought. And so the expectation is that he's going to take a full step forward. We'll have to see how that works into Mario's plans in terms of running the offense. But he's good. I mean, Brennan Armstrong was fantastic last year. As Tommy said, Sam Hartman's great. And then Leary. So I mean, you've got some capable players there. Slovis didn't have a great year last year at USC, but year before he was really good, one of the top freshmen in the country. So there's some talented quarterbacks, not quite like last year. And then, of course, I've said it a couple weeks ago, but just in the little bit of conversations I've had with Mack Brown, while he's not saying anything boisterous about the quarterback position, you can tell he's confident. He's not expecting this to be a dumpster fire by any stretch. Are they going to be Sam Howell? Not necessarily, but they don't need to be. And I think he has confidence that the quarterback play at Carolina is going to be pretty good this year.
So let's dive in there, Greg. Talk to some sources recently. I mean, they feel really good about the 3 they have. They like Connor Harrell a lot. And now I don't think he starts this year, but I think they've been really impressed with how he's grasped the offense. He's a valedictorian from his high school. He's the most athletic in the room out of those 3, Criswell, Drake May, Connor Harrell. So they really like Connor Harrell. Now, I don't know if he goes out and wins the job as a true freshman. That seems very unrealistic, but he's not just some guy you're going to have to sleep on. He's a guy they really like. And I think people, I don't know, the message boards just assume it's going to be Drake May. I don't think that's the case either. I think Criswell may have the stronger arm. He's 2 years more in the system. So they're going to let it play out. And this is not a situation like in 19 where Sam went out and won it. He was ahead in the spring and then went out and won it, 2 weeks into the preseason camp. This could go deep into camp. And I don't know. I don't think they want to play 2 QBs, but I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 QBs against FAMU. And, probably not the best idea against App, but if you can get 2 QBs, maybe in my mind, I'm thinking maybe play 2 QBs, first parts of the first 3 games and then name your starter ahead of Notre Dame. I'm sure they would like to have someone separate themselves before.
It sets up to play, at least 2 the first 3 weeks of the season, doesn't it, Greg? I mean, I don't think Harrell's going to get run. And it's interesting how they like Harrell that much. And a lot of people talked about, well, he had stats in high school because he had umpteen 5-stars around him in high school, but he did look pretty good. But May or Criswell, does it matter, Greg? Jason Staples seems to think that the quarterback will be a strength of this team no matter who's on that starting lineup.
Well, let me say this. I don't want to get into hyperbole by any stretch, but just watching Connor Harrell in spring ball, the kid's got just an incredible talent base. He's got a big arm for as small of a body as he is, and he is really quick. In the mold of a Lamar Jackson, not saying by any stretch he's going to be Lamar Jackson. I'm not claiming he's going to be the next Heisman contender for North Carolina, but maybe a Malik Cunningham type.
I was going to say Louisville guy.
Correct. It's just a big arm, and he can run. Mm-hmm. And that's a unique dynamic that North Carolina hasn't had in a long time, really since Marquise. So I understand the hype and the excitement about him because he's different than both Criswell and May. In terms of those two guys, I don't know that it really does matter. I think where it gets interesting is if they really are as close as it sounds like, and you want to get both guys reps, you got to be very careful if you want to go the 2 quarterback route. And Mack has done it. He did it twice before in Chapel Hill. He did it in Texas. He's shown a willingness to rotate quarterbacks. How will that work? How will that play out within the locker room as well as with the fan base? If he decides to go that route, you would have to think Drake May, being a local guy out of Charlotte with such a recruiting emphasis on the state of North Carolina, has to be in really good position. But we do know that Criswell has pushed him, and they've both taken equal number of snaps. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Certainly, to your point, I think both will play a lot those first 3 games. But after that, once you get to Notre Dame, how many reps for each guy do you see? Are we at that point where things start to settle down and we have a defined starting quarterback? Or are we going to be in this middle ground where maybe one guy takes 35 snaps and the other guy takes 30? That'll be a talking point if we get to that point of the season and that's still going on.
Ross, let me ask you this before you jump in. And I totally forgot my question. It was a great one. I can promise you that. So go ahead. It'll come back to me.
Longo loves competition. Offensive coordinator Phil Longo. Every coach loves competition. But, this is truly, he'll let it play out. And he'd love to see someone separate themselves in the first 3 weeks of camp. But he always is of the notion that you get guys in there and they compete and they decide who it is. It's a lot of coach speak, but that's what happens. And they'll put them in tons of situations where they'll be able to have a chance to differentiate themselves. Live action, scrimmages, decision-making scenarios, all that good stuff. And you would think, at some point becomes a 2-man race. And then at some point, one guy separates himself. They're going to have a lot of reps between Friday and when they kick off against the Rattlers. So I don't know. Let's get a poll here. Who's the starter against, if it's one guy, who's the starter against FAMU?
First snap, I'm going with Criswell.
Yep, Criswell.
I was going to say the same thing. I think, too, it's a statement for the program to give Criswell those first snaps. I think as well last year, at times when Sam got hurt here and there, Criswell would come in first. So you give the guy who's older the first reps, and then you let it play out from there. I have a good question for Ross here. I know we need to get a break in, but it's a good wild card question. We invite all viewers of all teams and all fans to come on the show. So we have an App State fan here talking about the game in Boone. What do you think the biggest challenge for the Tar Heels will be in Boone? Ross, what are you predicting? The foliage colors, just give us everything you're expecting out of Boone.
Well, I think UNC lucked out for a 12 o'clock kick. I think that is a complete game changer than an 8 p.m. or even like a 6 or obviously a 3:30. I think 12 o'clock, could be a little sleepier than it would be, but they're going to be rowdy, man. They're going to be coming in Friday, even Thursday. You're going to see a lot of tailgating, and the fans will be packed. And this is a huge game. So I think it's how UNC and the young players and the new quarterback handles crowd noise. And, one thing goes wrong, and we saw it in Chapel Hill when App was in Chapel Hill. Sam got rattled. There was that fumble. I think it was a fumble for a touchdown in that game, and App State won. So a couple things go the Mountaineers' way, and it kind of can snowball. So they got to come out and they got to block out the noise. And I think obviously the fan base and the rowdy fans is the biggest challenge for the Heels.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts up there. I remember my question.
Okay.
And this is for both of you guys. Ross, you can start. Can Carolina survive, or can Carolina have a good season with a quarterback that's just a game manager, that doesn't do anything special, doesn't have some ridiculous yards, that's just a straight manager of the game? No turnovers, get the ball in the right spot.
Yeah, I'll go quick with this one. I think Phil Longo's offense is made for your quarterback to be the star and to really put up yards. So, like the deep ball, look, you throw a deep ball, it's 60, 70 yards. You've got to make plays and hit the open guy in space. That's kind of what the offense is. I think Josh Downs does allow you a lot of versatility and a lot of creativity as the quarterback. And I think they're going to use him a lot of different ways in the backfield, in the outside, in the slot. So I think Josh Downs is going to be a huge help for the quarterback. But I think it's built for a star quarterback to sling the rock around. Greg?
I agree. I think Ross is exactly right with that. This is not a TJ Yates, John Shoup system where you can rely on your defense and just manage the game and check down, and then occasionally hit the deep ball. This offense has just been that way every time that Phil Longo's kind of lined up since the Sam Houston State days. You fling it and you add some power run, kind of like what Lincoln Riley's done so well at Oklahoma and now at USC. And that's how this offense is built. If you're expecting your quarterback to be a game manager in a Phil Longo offense, it's just not going to work. So you need somebody willing to take some risks, somebody willing to throw the ball down the field with accuracy. And I think they've got that with both Criswell and Drake May. But if those guys aren't electric, I just don't think the offense is near as successful as what we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, I think the wide receivers, I'm trying to think who they lost at wide receiver. I think they're going to be better this year with Antonio Green. I've heard he looks awesome, way more confident, more physical. He's finally coming to his own after last year. So him and Josh Downs and I think Kobe Passor.
Well, they need Andre Green to step in and be a stud.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard he looks awesome. I don't know what you've heard, Greg, but I've heard he is the real deal. It may take a little bit, but he is a freak. And so Andre Green could be that fourth, fifth receiver and come November, November, December, and be in the rotation. But Downs, Antonio Green, Kobe Passauer. Is it Pacehour? Pacehour. JJ Jones. I think Bryson Nesbitt will also be an offensive threat as well. But Andre Green's going to be the real deal.
Josh Downs need 100 receptions, or is the offense better if he's got 65 or 70, Greg?
I think it's better if he has fewer. And I think there's been so much talent come into this program the last couple of years. At some point, and I know I'm going to be corrected with a couple of these guys, but at some point, North Carolina needs one of these stud freshmen coming in to pop immediately from day one. Whether that's Hampton, whether that's Petaway, whether that's Green, somebody at one of these offensive skill positions needs to pop and be the man from day one, and that will change the outlook for this offense dramatically because we know what's coming back. And yes, Josh Downs was great, but he was open for a reason because he could get open, the other guys couldn't, so Sam Howell relied on him way too much. Somebody needs to pop to give one of these quarterbacks a second option. And if you've got two options, now all of a sudden you've got a lot of flexibility in your offense, and it makes it that much tougher on the defense.
I think just look at what they had 2 years ago with Newsome and Brown and those guys. I mean, there was somebody open on every play.
Right. And then Javonte and Michael. I mean, I think Petaway and Hampton, one of those guys is gonna be special.
I think one of those guys needs to blow up.
The running back room, we get into this now, the running back room is deep, talented, and they like them all. Elijah Green has gotten a lot of hype. He's the fastest running back in the room right now. He's a guy who hasn't done much at UNC. He's had a breakout spring. And, of course, British Brooks is kind of like the starter, I think, heading in, right? He was the representative of the ACC Media Day, and he had that breakout game against NC State. But then the two freshmen are the guys that you're like, wow, these guys could be very, very special. And then we were forgetting about Caleb Hood and DJ Jones come back from injury. So those are I think it's 6 guys. They have 6 scholarship running backs.
How do you keep them all happy? Is that even remotely possible?
They play 2 or 3. They never play more than that. I mean, last year was really just Ty Chandler and Sam Howell, honestly.
Yeah, John Bauman made a good point last night on the show that Howell had 182 carries or rushes or whatever. That's a lot to go around with some actual running backs because Drake May nor Criswell need that kind of stuff. Greg, Jason Staples thought Caleb Hood had the most upside this season from the running back room, and he's a guy we hadn't talked about since he got hurt last year.
Yeah, well, if you remember back to training camp last year, he's the guy that jumped up the depth chart because some of these other guys are just kind of, I don't want to say languishing, but they just weren't making the move that North Carolina needed them to make. So you had Ty Chandler, and they was like, all right, who's going to be the next guy? And it was Caleb in camp. And then, of course, he he got the injury. He's got such a unique skill set just because he's a big kid. He can lay the hammer. And he's got good footwork. So it's not like a big lumbering fullback or anything. He's just a big kid that can lay a pop. And that's different than most of these kids. Now, I know with Hampton coming in, that changes things a little bit. But I think he's a unique option. I'm not so sure that I would say this is a uber talented room. Yes, with the freshmen, for sure they have talent, but they're raw.
Yeah.
I mean, British Brooks, he had a couple good games there late against State and South Carolina. But he's been a special teams guy his entire career. So
I wonder how effective will he really be? Like, I mean, he was good against State, but like, why hasn't he played more if he's going to be your starter?
Right.
You know, I didn't mean to cut you off, Greg. I mean, that's.
I agree with you. Yeah, that's.
No, I mean, my point last night and all season, and Brooks is a great story. And he was a hell of a back against NC State, but he was fresh. Everybody else had been beat up for 12 games or 11 games, and that makes a difference. And they still didn't use him enough against South Carolina. I think Brooks gets the chance, but I agree with you guys. One of these freshmen, and somebody in the chat said, Tommy, you've probably seen Hampton more than anybody, how good he is. Well, I said it last night, and I've said it till the cows come home. He was unfair in college, in high school. It was not fair with the talent they played against. And he's been that way since he was a kid in middle school. So how that translates, I believe I've heard he's already one of the strongest kids on the team as a freshman. And so he's going to get an opportunity. If he stays healthy and he stays committed and dedicated to it, I think he can be really good. But like you said, Greg, it's not overly talented or elite right now. Can it be? Sure. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, you don't have an elite running back room when your starter is a guy that's played a game and a half.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And you got to make it happen.
I wonder if Pettaway is going to be the compliment to British Brooks. I mean, I've heard good things about Elijah Green, but Pettaway was special, I think, and he was obviously an early enrollee. All right, you want me to do the JTS read, Tommy?
Yeah, man, you do it.
All right, coming in here hot. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com, the sponsor of Inside Carolina Podcast, been with us for years now. It's football season, boys and girls and everybody else. Get your T-shirts, your jerseys, your sweatshirts, Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com. And if you are an Inside Carolina subscriber, make sure to go on the premium message boards and get your 10% off discount code right on Franklin Street, online at JohnnyT-shirt.com. Great customer service, local, alumni. We all want to support that stuff. And the 10% off code is just a special bonus. Get your jerseys ready. Get your tailgating stuff ready. They have everything. Anything you need for the tailgate, for the home, for the office, of course, for your friends and family. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. Tommy.
Let the national guys pay the bills on the audio version. We'll be right back. It's On the Beat Live. Ross Martin, Greg Barnes, John Bauman. I'm Tommy Ashley. 9:40 on the East Coast. Stay with us. All right, boys, we're back. On the Beat Live, special edition, Ross Martin edition has joined us, brought some liveliness and some great points in this first segment. And
Thank you.
To your credit, I enjoyed the App State discussion because I'm not going up there unless somebody else drives. So if somebody wants to drive me, I'll go to that game. But let's talk a little bit about the offensive line briefly. Jason Staples is working on the previews, and we'll talk more about them as camp opens. But Corey Gaynor comes in, Greg Barnes, and Ross come in after this. Brian Anderson was there. Kieran Johnson has left the program. I mean, is the center position going to be a strength this year? Because it was certainly not last year with the unhealthiness of Anderson at times and some struggles elsewhere. And is Anderson good enough, like somebody asked, is Anderson good enough to play another position if he's not at center? I mean, that's a talented guy sitting on the bench if he doesn't.
It's a good question, but I would say that given what transpired at the center position last year with Brian Anderson was hurt in the preseason and probably could have had surgery during the season, but he didn't want to do that. He wanted to stay and play as much as he could, despite not being really effective. But he wanted to make sure he was there to help his teammates. And then Kieran Johnson, he was hurt all year too. And while Curon's a guy that could play center and guard, now he's decided to step away from football. I expect Anderson and Gaynor to play and rotate to some extent at center. And I think both those guys remain at center. Coming into training camp, both of them had only practiced at center and spring ball. And I think that will stay through training camp and into the season. And I think there's enough bodies, a lot of inexperienced guys, but there's enough bodies at both guard and tackle that they'll, Coach Bicknell will be able to do that.
That was a good point about Curion. That was actually something that I wanted to highlight, because I think that's actually a really good sign for the offensive line this season. I'm not sure, but I assume that was a conversation that the coaching staff had with Curion, understanding here's what the playing time might be, here's what our needs are along the offensive line. And for them to say to a veteran offensive lineman who played, I believe, 648 snaps last year, which is a good number of snaps, for them to say, hey, we're comfortable with what we have. Maybe this isn't the exact fit for you this season. I think that shows some confidence in the offensive line and some of the pieces that they have coming back. So I think that's a little tidbit that shows maybe some of the transfers are looking better than expected, and maybe some of the younger players, some of those talented offensive linemen that UNC has recruited, are also looking a little bit better.
Johnny B, good point. What do you think? I think Anderson and Gaynor could play a little bit. I think it helps to have two players, the offensive. I mean, look, it's a physically demanding position. You want continuity in the snapping, but I could see Anderson coming in the third quarter and taking some reps away and bringing Gaynor back. I think it's a good thing. I think both are capable. But look, if Gaynor's the better guy and he's the more experienced guy, we've heard that he's a really strong leader. If he's the best player and he doesn't need that, that's fine. Just run with him. But I think having two centers that can come in and both play is very important. And I think Anderson is such a great teammate that that'll be okay with him if he is taking a little bit of second fiddle. But I think it's important.
Yeah, and Bicknell has said, and granted, every offensive line coach has said this, dating back to the Sam Pittman days and prior. You want to be able to play 10 guys if you can. Mm-hmm. Bicknell said the most he's ever been able to really play is 8. Carolina, I guess, was probably at 7 last year. But Bicknell's point was, if you look at defensive lines, the really good ones, they're rotating not just 1s and 2s, but sometimes 1, 2s, and 3s. So when you get into the fourth quarter and Clemson, and you got, what was his name, Tyler Davis that we used to talk about a lot, Tommy? When he's only played 25 snaps and my center has played 68 snaps, who's got the advantage? And so, I really think that you can, the intent would be to rotate, especially at the center position, but rotate as many guys as you can. They really like Rice at tackle. They like Spencer Rowland, the transfer, at tackle. William Barnes is there. Austin Richards. So you've got bodies there on the edge that they think can be pretty good. Do you trust them, though? And that was the question last year. Did Stacey Searles really trust the offensive line beyond his starting 5? And the same goes on the other side of the ball. We heard all about the defense having good talent. Jay Bateman didn't really want to rotate too much. So when you've got the talent, you got to be willing to play them. You got to be willing to give them a chance to see if you can actually formulate a legitimate 2 deep.
This is the time of the year when we start interviewing these players and coaches. They rave about how deep they are. They rave about, we can go. Yeah, we got a good 2 deep. And then all we've seen is they play the same 5. They play the same 4 or 5 on defense. And that's the hype. You buy into that hype. And because this is important. This is inside baseball for covering a team. No one talks bad about the team during the preseason training camp. Like, you don't have players bashing teammates. You don't have coaches saying, oh yeah, we're gonna suck at center. It's all positive. So that's what we have to write on. So you have to either check with sources or not play up as much. And I think last year we bought into that hype a little more than we should have. And I think this year as a website, we're taking a little bit more of a cautioned role. But we've always heard, we're super deep on defensive line. We're going 8 deep. And you only see 5 or 6 offensive linemen. But I think losing losing 3 starters on offensive line is tough, Tommy. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I didn't mean to cut you, but coach can talk about how deep they are, but if they're only playing 5 or 6, that's what they really think.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
to your point, and on the basketball side, Hubert Davis said that as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. But I think offensive line can still be better, right, Greg? Even though, to Ross's point, you lost 3 NFL guys, but they were a train wreck last year at times. And if you'd have told anybody that offensive line right there, look at this tape, there's 3 offensive guys that are going to get drafted in the NFL, nobody would have believed that just based on the tape they put up last year, at least in my opinion. So how much does Bicknell matter for this group?
I think his mindset is completely different than what Stacey Searles brought to the table. In theory, that should work, because what did Mack say last year? This time he was talking about, look, we were not strong enough running the ball when we want to run the ball. The thing about the Larry Fedora and Phil Longo offense is you take what the defense gives you. So if the defense stacks the box, you're going to throw. Well, that's fine and dandy, but there comes time in games where it's 3rd and 1 and there's 3 minutes left. You got to get that 1 yard, and you don't want to have to be throwing some slant route or some 10-yard out to pick up a yard. You want to be able to hand the ball off and let your offensive line push the defensive line forward 2 yards and make it an easy first down. That's what all the best teams have always done in this sport. And Mack was really upset that was not happening. And part of that's how Stacey kind of coaches his offensive line. But what Bicknell said, and these are things to kind of watch for, 2 things. One, he wants his offensive line to be aggressive. So instead of waiting for the defensive line to establish contact and to initiate contact once the ball snapped, he wants his offensive linemen to hit first, not just to sit back. And what that's going to do is that helps establish a physical presence at the point of attack for your run game, but it also allows you to create a pocket. He does not want centers being knocked back into the quarterback's lap. He does not want tackles being pinched in by defensive ends. He wants tackles to establish width. He wants the center to establish the depth of the pocket. And that gives the quarterback an idea of, okay, well, I know where my center's supposed to be. I know where my tackles are. Therefore, I know what I'm supposed to have here in front of me as a pocket. And that should provide comfort. That's a little bit different than what Stacey wanted to do, who was more of kind of a true zone blocking scheme offensive line coach. So as I said, in theory, that should help. That should help what Mack wants to do and being more physical and running the ball. We'll have to see exactly how it plays out.
And Greg, what I thought was interesting with that, Greg, is that's also in pass protection, like you're saying, like going out and hitting someone in pass protection instead of dropping back, which normally your left and right tackles take steps back to block. So it was kind of a different philosophy. So it's definitely different in how Bicknell coaches things, like Greg said. John, sorry.
And Greg, that reminds me of one of my defining moments of the UNC football season last year. It was against Wofford. I forget the exact scenario, but it was goal line, and UNC's offensive line couldn't push it in against Wofford's defensive line.
Yeah.
That's a good segue into one of the things that I'm looking for in Saturday's practice. UNC has an open practice this Saturday. I'm going to be looking for UNC offensive line's toughness to see if that's changed under this new regime. For the 3 of you at UNC's open practice on Saturday, what are you looking out for, or what should fans keep an eye out for if they're able to attend that practice?
Yeah, they'll be in shorts and helmets, right? Open practice, but I'm looking at body types to see what kind of shape they're in coming in, because Staples was on point last year. They were a little heavy at times, a little sluggish at times. I'm looking to see how those bodies have changed over the summer. Ross, what do you think?
You're talking just offensive line, John?
Anything. It can be anything you're looking for.
I mean, I'm interested to see the depth chart for the offensive line, because, I mean, this kind of segues nicely. But, I think we know Asim Richards is starting at left tackle. We don't know right tackle. It could be a combination of the transfer, Spencer Holland, who we haven't seen yet. So we have no idea what this guy looks like. Spencer Holland from Harvard. Diego Pounds could be at right tackle. William Barnes could get some time there too. And of course, Zach Rice. And Zach Rice is going to be the big question mark. So how does he look now with 6-7 months at UNC? And then I think Ed Montilus is going to be a starting guard. And who's the other guard? Is it going to be Caden Baker, who's playing more at guard now, not tackle? Is it going to be Adorno? And of course, at center, we think it's going to be Gaynor or Anderson. So I'm interested to see, because there's 3 open spots there. If we kind of have the left tackle and center positions locked in.
I saw Zach. You guys have seen Zach Rice in person. I haven't seen him in person other than at a basketball game. And the fact that guy is 18 years old is pretty ridiculous. So I'll be surprised if he doesn't get some run. What else on the offensive line, Greg?
Well, the story on Rice is that he's a dog, right? He's very aggressive. And if that's what you want your mindset to be for the entire unit, I don't think it's a bad thing for a young kid to come in and bite early. I think that could really help this team, and kind of, if you got a young guy coming in showing that he can play, maybe that wakes up some of the older guys and changes the culture a little bit in that position group room. I didn't answer John's question. Buck Sanders has talked a lot over the years about how it's the further away you get from the ball, the easier it is to pop early. So while these guys are in shorts, you're going to be able to see guys that stand out. I mean, we saw that with Josh Downs. We've seen that with Javonte Williams even. You know when guys have freakish athletic skills. And so Andre Green, what does he look like? Or Mario Hampton, Petaway, some of these young guys. I keep going back to the young guys, right? Who's going to stand out? J.J. Jones coming back now that he's got a year under his belt. How does he look? And so those are the people I'm looking out for, because you don't need to see them in pads to see what kind of athleticism and those kind of things that they have. You can see that, if they're in a suit and tie.
Flip it. Defensive line. Miles Murphy got on us after the spring game that we didn't include him in the sack discussion last year. Gregory Hall infamously had Des Evans leading the team. Well, that is one prediction I got right, friends. But what are we looking at on the defensive line for Tim Cross? I mean, it's not a talent issue this year. It's got to perform. Ross, Tim Cross I think he's a little bit on the mark here, or maybe on the hot seat a little bit for his guys to actually perform.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm sure y'all have talked about this before, but they're going back to a 4-3 alignment. So you have that jack position and a true defensive end, which Des Evans moves to defensive end. So you're going to have a little bit different look, but you got to like at kind of the top what they have with Raymond Vahasek stepping in as a 5th year, grad or 5th year senior. This would be his 3rd year starting, and he's talented. We've seen him flash, and you need that consistent force. That's what he's going to provide. And of course, Miles Murphy has kind of become kind of the preseason star for UNC, and so I think he's going to have a special year, and it could be kind of a first team, second team ACC type guy. But then behind him, there's some, Max talks about Kedrick Bingley Jones a lot, and then Kevin Hester is a big
KJ Binkley.
Yeah, Mac has not pronounced his name right since
Ever.
He's been here, and I keep checking it. I'm like, am I reading this wrong? I go to the Go Heels. Does Go Heels have it wrong? It's unbelievable. But Kevin Hester, I think they're going to miss Tamarion Fox, which I think he would factor in. But and then of course, as I ramble here, Travis Shaw. I mean, all eyes on Travis Shaw. Talk about a guy I'm looking forward to seeing on Saturday is Travis Shaw and what he looks like moving. We saw him in March and April at spring practice, huffing and puffing that first day, Greg. I mean, to see, I'm sure he's lost 20, 30 pounds this summer. So I think if he can be a factor, that adds just one more piece of depth. And then Des Evans and the defensive ends, I think they're going to be good there with the Jack, with Noah Taylor. So there's a lot of names, a lot of bodies. It's about kind of put up or shut up at this point with that team, because they have the bodies, they have the experience, they have the talent. It's kind of time to perform now.
Yeah, and I think Ross mentions a good point there at the start with Vahasek and Murphy. I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but Tommy will understand. But Kendall High, when he came in back in 2002, there's a lot of hype around him. but he was a good player out of Salisbury. But he was like 250 pounds as a freshman at defensive tackle. Well, he had to play because they didn't have anybody else to play. Ryan Sims had already gone to the league, and there was really nobody left in the cupboard for John Bunning. And so you've got a 250-pound true freshman, and I think he probably started 10 games that year, 8 games.
Got destroyed.
I mean, that's why that was one of the worst defenses we've ever seen. And even though he had plenty of talent, he was not in anywhere close to a position to play that many snaps as a true freshman. And so because you have guys like Murphy and Vahasek who have been there, you can count on them. Even though Travis Shaw may be the next Dexter Lawrence, he doesn't have to be from day one. And you can work him in and make sure that he experiences success, scheduled success, so that his confidence builds. And maybe by midseason, you can unleash him fully. By having some of these veterans, I mean, we saw it with Des Evans, right? I mean, it took him a full year to finally kind of get it. And even last year, it wasn't where we thought he would be. Now, as a third-year guy, maybe he's ready to kind of settle in at a true defensive end position and can kind of move forward. So I think we talk about the talent a lot. I think the veteran experience and leadership is just as critical because you're allowing the younger guys to come along at their own speed. And I think that's a big benefit for Gene Chizik.
It's been mentioned a couple times in press conference and stuff. How silly was it that Des Evans was dropping into pass coverage guarding wheel routes and stuff? It's just comical. They made him do that. He should have been a defensive end all along. It's just unbelievable trying to get him in coverage as an outside linebacker.
I think the epic one though has got to be Clyde Pender, dropping into pass coverage. But I agree with you. Just let the guys go. See ball, hit ball. It sounds more like that. How many of these guys are going to play? Same question we had on the offensive line. Coaches talk about they want 10 guys that can play. They rarely play more than that. How many realistically, Ross, do we see get significant snaps?
I think they have eight players, 8 deep. They'll have Miles Murphy, Rain Vahasek behind them. They'll have KJ Hester and Travis Shaw, and you'll have Kamen Rucker and Des Evans, and you'll have Noah Taylor and like a Chris Collins, I think would be the other guy there. So I think that's a Chris Collins. I mean, he's been here 4 or 5 years almost. So you got a lot of experience in town there. I think they could go eight deep effectively. Maybe split it 2/3 for the starters and 1/3 for the backups because they do roll in. I mean, that's pretty common, especially on positional and situational downs for the defensive line. Greg?
Yeah, and Ross didn't even mention Bingley Jones and Jaleel Taylor there.
And Keyshawn Silver.
I mean,
I'm not sure how much those guys play, though, honestly.
Right. But I mean, Bingley Jones has been banged up. And he's finally healthy.
Dude, Jabari Ritzie.
Yeah. I mean, there are a ton of options.
Yeah. Jabari Ritzie he'll be a big time player. So
was Carolina going to 8-3 defense, 8-1-2 defense?
That's right. No, but Jabari Ritzie, I don't know why I would mention him, but he's going to be a big time impact player. I think he can play a little end and a little 3 technique. I mean, when he was a recruit, Don and I always talked about how freak athlete he was as a recruit. And this will be year 2 for him, right? Yeah. So
tons of talent. And with tons of talent comes no excuses for the front guys to play. Linebackers.
Can we go ahead and make that statement, Tommy, that we can get away from, they're just inexperienced, even though they're very talented? That was the one conversation last year that kind of drove me nuts. Is like, yeah, they're talented, but they're like, freshmen and sophomores. They need to be like seniors before they're really good.
We need shirts, Tommy. We need Tommy Ashley branded T-shirts that say "Tons of talent means no excuses."
Hey, I'm all
for
it.
Inside Carolina.
I'm all for it. But if you're listening, we need them in extra large and double extra large and medium for Jason Staples. Linebacker. Ross, you mentioned him straight out of the gate. Ra Dilworth may not play much or may not start, and he's uber talented. Greg, I'll start with you this time on the linebacker side of it. Cedric Gray, Power Eccles. You would think they're probably penciled in as the starters here, but again, there's talent there, and there's options where Bateman didn't use any options. It was Gimmel, and whoever else. I guess Cedric Gray when he was out there and whatever. So what's going to happen this year with Chiswick and those linebackers? Are we going to see more guys, or is it going to be ride with two and see what happens?
I think just from a little bit that I've heard, to your point, Gray and Eccles are the guys. Powers really come on. And I think it was Mack that mentioned they needed guys like Deuce and Sebastian Cheeks and Ra to really come on and kind of solidify that two deep. I believe it was Chiswick who made mention of Ra speed, and I just read about and hear about the star position, and I know they got options there. I just feel like you can really use Ra in some unique packages, like the Simmons kid at Clemson a couple years ago. I mean, basically, he's a safety in a linebacker's body. If you've got two starters that you really like in Gray and Power Eccles, use somebody that has freakish athleticism like Ra. It remains to be seen if that'll happen, but I think that would be kind of a wasted opportunity. Always remember back when Butch came in, and he was like, "What are we doing with Brandon Tate? We're just letting him return kicks. That's all. Like we should be letting him touch the ball almost every play. Like the fact that this team has not been doing that is a crime." And so I think we're getting to the point. Ross is talking about Ritzy. He's a freakish athlete. Ra is too. And so I think some of these guys you have to understand they may not be every down players quite yet, but use them to your advantage and get unique with it without being too cutesy about it.
And Greg, to your point, Ra, he played 33 snaps last year according to Pro Football Focus. Power Eccles only played 155. So there's a ton of opportunity. Jeremiah Gemmel ended up playing 768 snaps. Just for context, you can see they're going to get a lot more opportunity this year and hopefully combine that opportunity with improved fit with the scheme. And
didn't Power get most of his snaps because was it Gemmel that got tossed?
Yeah, in the Wake Forest game.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we haven't talked about Cedric Gray. I mean, I think you're returning one of the best linebackers in the Coastal, at least. He led UNC in tackles and he made some big time plays. So in Cedric Gray, man, he is mature. He's a leader. He looks the part. He's kind of a little bit longer, I think, than Power Eccles, and he played tons last year, kind of winning that job, kind of out of nowhere from Eugene Asante, who didn't play at all after the Virginia Tech game, I think, when he was whiffed on a couple tackles. So yeah, I think they love Power Eccles and they really like Cedric Gray as well. And Cedric Gray's a proven commodity. We only have 5 scholarship linebackers. It's because you only have 2 spots now. It's not like you're not playing 3 linebackers across the board because they're playing those outside linebacker spots, but you have only 2 middle linebackers, and then that star or what is that, the slot corner type
nickel
position?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, nickel corner. Yeah,
that's your Charlie Brown. My favorite guy on non-Carolina was Xavier Debe for Virginia Tech. I believe number 11.
Cam Chancellor too.
Ever Cam Chancellor type guy, and with Conley out, a lot of people have said put Ra out there. I mean, you got to get Ra on the field. I mean, you can't leave a guy that can fly like that. And Power Eccles, to the Zach Rice being a dog point, Power Eccles is that guy on defense. And quite frankly, with the targeting rules in college football, you might need to have somebody behind Eccles ready to play.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean, that's just the way he plays. And Carolina needs more of that. Go ahead, Ross.
Do we know about Conley's availability, Greg? I mean, we haven't asked about it.
The last is that I think the hope is maybe by the end of September that he'd be fully ready to go. I expect to see him this week, but I assume he's going to be completely limited through training camp as they try to bring him back slowly.
And quick shout out, Gregory Hall, one of his last Inside Carolina articles was about JQ Conley. If anybody in the stream hasn't read that article yet, go read it. Talks about his journey, working back through the injury. It was a really great article by our old friend Gregory.
Yeah, much deeper than football discussion too.
Emotional.
It's worth.
Right.
Yeah,
Mental.
and you got the mental side
Mental health,
of the
John.
game. Pretty cool stuff from Gregory. Talking about the defensive backs, and again, this is on the beat live. We're pushing. We're after 10 o'clock. We have kept Ross Martin on board for over an hour.
I know, it's my
but
bedtime.
we're moving back on the defensive side of the ball. We mentioned Conley, but Greg. No, I'll start with Ross this time. Tony Grimes got to be better this year. I didn't think he was very good at times last year. I know that he's very talented, but I don't think it showed like it probably should last year. Function of a lot of things, communication or lack thereof.
Yeah.
Is he the leader of this defensive backfield when Conley's still on the shelf?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got a lot of guys that can be leaders, but I think you're right, man. This is like the money year for Grimes, right? I mean, he thought he would go pro after this year, right? That was why you enroll early. That's why you skip your senior year in high school. You enroll early. You play some as a freshman. You start as a sophomore. You just break out as a junior. So this is kind of the year where he is aiming for the NFL draft, and physically it's all there just to put it together. And I think Charlton Warren coming in with Gene Chizik is going to fix a lot of the communication issues, and that's going to be a big talking point all preseason about the miscommunication pre-snap with the defensive backs, safeties, linebackers, and all that stuff. And so hopefully that gets all fixed and they can just go out and play. But you got to like the defensive backs, the cornerbacks. You got Grimes, you got Storm Duck, who I think will be playing some slot, I've heard. And then you got the transfer legend from Ohio State. His last name is it
Cavalos?
Cavalos.
You and Don were a trip on that podcast talking about him. But
I gotta get that name right. But legend. I mean, he's coming from Ohio State, and he came here to play. And he came to Carolina to play. So you got him, and you got Ladason Hollins as well. It's a lot of game guys. This is 85 scholarship players. So give me a break if you're messing names here. So, I think you like the depth at corner, and then safety. Losing Conley sucks, but Jair Biggers has played a lot. Cam Kelly has gotten a little bit better and better. Don Chapman's played a lot too, and a lot of these guys have played a little corner as well. So I think they got plenty of bodies back there just figuring it out. And I think, man, Warren, I love Warren. He was really good to me when I was back in 15, 16, and I think he is just a good coach, a good recruiter. So I think he'll get it figured out on that side. Any issues with coaching or scheme stuff?
We talked about Bicknell's impact. We've talked about Chizik's impact. Greg, does Charlton Warren's impact, is that as big as any of those two guys? The newness factor, the old newness factor since he's back?
I think so, and I think it speaks volumes that Gene Chizik, when Mack reached out, was like, "Yeah, I'm coming, but I want to bring Charlton with me." And it kind of speaks to the relationship they've had over the years. But Charlton knows what he's doing. He's worked with some big time programs, and I think he's really going to be able to assist Dre Bly. I think there's a lot of friction kind of in Dre Bly and Bateman in terms of how they were communicating, how they wanted guys to do certain things, and some frustration there, I think, late in the season. So I think Warren kind of comes in and provides perspective to Bly. Dre's in that unique situation, right, where he was one of the best cornerbacks we've ever seen at both college and NFL level, and now he's trying to coach kids to play up to their potential. And that's easier said than done. And so as he's getting better as a position coach, Warren's going to provide him some sound guidance. And in doing that, it's going to help tie into Ross's point, the communication aspect of it, where the corners and the safeties and the nickelback, the star, can all communicate. And I just throw another name in there. DeAndre Boykins is somebody they really like. That's the guy.
And nickel, right?
And nickel, right? That they think he's a kid that, while he's not the biggest, he can play corner, but he can also lay a hit. And so that they have a ton of options. Again, the talent is not a problem. It's the coaches putting the pieces together to function as a team, as a top 25 team. That's what this season's about, because I've said it numerous times. 2023 is going to be a potential breakout year for this program in terms of challenging for the ACC title. And if you're going to make a top 10 push, it's going to occur then. We know the talent is in place, and it certainly will be by next year. Can the coaching staff coach these guys up to play to that talent? That's what this year is all about. That's why Mack Brown made some of the moves that he made. So that's going to be something fun to watch this year.
All right, guys. What's left? We're going to check out special teams on Saturday, Ross.
I can't talk about that right now. Well, I'll say one thing about defense. So Chiswick will be up in the booth. I mean, just like Bill breaks down here, Chiswick will be up in the booth. I mean, it's a little bit changed. Bateman spent most of his career at UNC on the field level. Chiswick, I'm assuming, will be in the booth because Warren is his right-hand man. He is a true co-defensive coordinator, and Warren is helping create this defense, and he'll be like the defensive coordinator on the ground. I imagine that's how they'll do it, but Chiswick will be up in the booth. So I think that's an element to the situation as well. I don't think Chiswick's ever been on the field as a coordinator. And yeah, there's a lot of names. I mean, Obi Egbuna is another name that he's in his junior year. There's a lot of bodies. The sophomore Marcus, forget his last name. So there's a lot of names there at safety and cornerback for defensive back. So like I said, the names and talent are there, the experience is there. It's just a matter of putting it all together.
So what's the saying? We're going to trademark tons of talent means no excuses.
Yeah, that's right.
2022.
That can be the title of the show, Tommy.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it might be. I'm gonna get it on the back of a shirt, and you're gonna come to the
I
bowls.
I think I still have a T-shirt from 2010 that says "No excuses," right?
Really, I think I have real Tar Heel folks. Whatever it says, 2021 or something like that, or 2001. Sorry, real Carolina fans think 2020, whatever. You know what the heck I'm talking about. Greg Barnes, close the show with your thoughts here. I mean, Carolina opens Friday. I think last year has created a ton of skepticism, and I think Mack Brown's acknowledged that, and I think, quite frankly, Mack Brown's caused some of that in the preseason last year, if I'm being honest, what I remember hearing. But where is this team going into preseason camp? I mean, is it a legitimate chance to be much better than people say at this point? A lot of work to be done, but serious question, is it legitimately an option for this team to be really good?
I think the option is on the table. We go back to what we talked about to begin the show. Over under is about 7.5. So does 8-4 count as a significant improvement, even though this team last year should have at least won 8 games? I think that's where you kind of get into the semantics of it. Can this team win 10 games? Is that what we're talking about? Well, I mean, a lot's going to have to fall into place for that to happen. While there are some easy games on the schedule, there are some tough ones as well. Notre Dame's a tough game. Miami, Pittsburgh, Wake Forest, NC State. Those are 5 really tough games where Carolina could be a lot better than they were a year ago and still lose. And if the cards fell wrong, I mean, they could be 7-5 and win the games really they were supposed to win. So we'll have to wait and see. Coming into the season, I think Mack Brown and his staff have handled the offseason impeccably well. They've really focused on what happened last year, why it happened. I've sought to correct that. I've really kind of beaten the idea of it's the next step in the process. It's not about the outside noise. And I think that's all very important. Ross made a great point that this time of year, every single team is undefeated. Every single player, every single position group is really good. These guys really stepped up. They made strides in the offseason. We can only report what we hear. And so as you go through training camp, it's not us blowing smoke. It's us just sharing what we've heard from coaches and players. And so we try to make sure we don't overdo it, but we're just relaying the information we have. How does Mack handle that? Is there an emphasis by the coaching staff to kind of pump the guys up, or are they still kind of pumping the brakes? I think that will tell us a lot. If they're pumping the brakes, maybe the guys are starting to get a little bit too excited. Maybe they're not paying attention to the P's and Q's and those kind of things. So you can kind of read behind the scene a little bit to figure out what's going on. But how Mack and his staff kind of handle the next 4 weeks will really kind of tell us where this team is as they head into that Florida A&M game. And I do think it's interesting. We're not going to know what this team looks like until Notre Dame. Yeah, they could be 3-0. That doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. I know App State was picked to win their division in the Sun Belt. yay, go Mountaineers. I think that'll be a game where Carolina doesn't have to play their A game to win, but they're going to have to show up. But besides that, they should be 3-0. And we won't know to that Notre Dame game, the end of September, what kind of team this really is.
I agree 100%. Ross, so we're going to end it with that. That pretty much said it all, right?
Yeah, that's good. I got nothing else to add.
Good stuff. I've been your host, Tommy Ashley, John Bauman, making it all happen. I'm going to sit back and just enjoy my Inside Carolina tumbler. The next time, John, you're leading the way. Greg Barnes, always excellent. Ross Martin came on and joined us. Gave an hour and 15 minutes of his time on a Tuesday night. I am impressed.
Ross, is it really past your bedtime, or are you sleeping in now that you don't have to do these early morning workouts?
Yeah. I've been showing up early morning. I got to keep my workouts going. So I show up to the workout, but I just walk because I have to get my day started. Otherwise, I can't sleep in. I got to start producing content for the people. So,
well, but walking, when you get to be my age, walking will be a pleasure. So enjoy all that fancy stuff.
I eat too much. I got to keep somehow burning calories. All right.
You want to eat something? Go to Jimmy's in Baltimore.
Right.
I actually went, and it is ridiculous. Gained 10 pounds. Shout out Jimmy's Seafood. All right, boys, it's been fun. Everybody listening, check out Ross Martin with the Scoop with Don Callahan a little bit later in the week. Taylor Vippolis has got a Players Lounge later in the week, and next week we'll be back with On the Beat Live. It's been real.